here, and today we're going to talk about different issues for the next, maybe week or so. And today I'm going to talk about issues of the homeless. Let's talk about that right quick. So the thing is that recently you heard that a bunch of people died, right? Yeah, in the cold. And I actually support their right to be in the cold and die. It sounds extreme, but the thing is that the conditions inside the shelter system are extremely violent and unsafe. You know how much we spend on the homeless here in New York City? About $4 billion. And a lot of these Democrat-owned, the Democrats are, right, they get rich off of this. Remember that Cuomo's sister, I think, or sister-in-law or something like that, was actually executive at one of these homeless shelters. Christine Quinn is the owner of the largest shelter system, Women in Need, right? And a lot of these executives at these not-for-profit, at these shelters, look, I've been homeless at the age of 16. Had a lot of experience with being homeless and the thing is that most often the government-run stuff is horrible, violent, right? Yeah, you try to get they have their own things that they're trying to fulfill, right? They have certain, like they want to put someone into they want to be successful and say they housed someone. So let's take a look at, for example, a place called Newburgh, New York. Yeah, Newburgh, New York actually recently had a environmental pollutants in the water. The people who have cancer that I know, their children have cancer and even died of cancer. People I know personally. Hochul has a new law where they're going to try to build high urban density housing by transportation zones. And what happens is that the people in homeless shelters are pushed to live in these kinds of communities where there's money that was used by HUD money to build homes over there, and now no one wants to live there because of the toxic, cancerous stuff going on there. So what happens is that if you're in the shelter system, a lot of people also for years, right? If you've been in the shelters, they've been trying to move you out to Far Rockaway. That Far Rockaway is going to get flooded and all this other thing, right? But a lot of money was pumped into the system to rebuild Rockaway, and now they have to fill them. They know there's problems there, but people that are smart investors aren't going to invest there, so they line up the people that is homeless to experience the toxic conditions, stuff like that. They're more concerned about fulfilling certain program needs. Usually the religious shelters are usually better about this. You know what I mean? They're doing it for God. They're doing it because they really want to help people. But a lot of times government people, what happens, it's just a job for them. They don't really care. So, of course, I don't want to freeze to death. I'm dead serious. But the thing is that it was a protest of the violent conditions in the shelter. Those people are definitely afraid to go in there because it's just such a madhouse in there, and since it's so violent. Now, I'm part of the Upper East Side, has some events going on where they're trying to stop a shelter being built in their neighborhood. I'm in contact with these people, right, being Republican and all that. If you watch, if you go to dgl7.com, I actually have a video, and near the end of the video, there's a guy named Devon Nash, formerly homeless. He may even be homeless right now. He was in the shelter when he ran for public advocate. And he's one of the best guys because he really understands with the system inside, right? Yeah? And placing people and stuff like that. But the thing is that the elite class, they want to, I have the solution, blah, 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 right? But they don't really want to empower or really listen to the people that's actually living under those conditions. So they made him an offer. They're like, you know what? Like, we'll talk about your issue, but what we want to do is we promise you that no one has to know that you actually gave us these ideas. What? This is the trap that honestly, I found that really disrespectful, but because the thing is that we need to actually be listened to, heard, and after they implement like a half-assed solution, then what's going to happen is that it's going to fail because there's no real, care or real, heart in it. And then what happens is that after it fails, right? They'll say, "Oh, but we did what you said. We had these great ideas." Nothing about us without us. People that are actually impacting, people that are part of that whole system need to have a feedback loop where they can be heard. And until this happens, right? So the thing is that there was a protest which was silenced by the media and the consultants, the Morris Katz of the world, right? DSA is in on this, by the way, right? To silence the actual people that are suffering. So some bougie ass, not-for-profit leader getting a 6-figure salary can say, "Oh, blah, blah, blah." Really messed up. Another thing about the shelter system, just so you know, there's something called, if you're actually have like a family or stuff like that, if you're a victim of domestic violence, you get fast-tracked into the public housing system. A lot of the people, right, you're going to see them complaining. I think Ina Vernikov is like, "Oh, they're going to build an all-men's shelter." The thing is that, right, if you're a single man, you're deprioritized for all the services. So the thing is that the people who get in, right, they're going to get fast. So that's who's left. Not only that, but the shelter, like if you have like a felony, you can't get into public housing, but you can get into the shelter. So just so you know too, you could look it up in Chinatown. They have like 8 shelters in Manhattan, Chinatown. And once they had those shelters, actually 4 homeless people actually died in Chinatown, killed by another homeless man who was brought in from the shelter. There's certain people in the shelter system that are problematic and violent, and they're shuttled around the system to neighborhoods which don't have as much, political strength. So what's going to happen is that your local homeless people are going to actually die when they set up these shelters. That's what's going to happen. So, but of course, right, they don't want to listen to a homeless person. Sure, okay. Another thing, just so you know, I'm putting this all out there, right? Yeah. The thing is that there's something called like the one-time deal where they actually set you up into like they can set you up into an apartment, but before that apartment gets, before you can move in, the government has to actually do an inspection of that apartment, which is not true for regular commercial apartments. So sometimes, right, the government doesn't have a fire under the butt. So sometimes it takes them a month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. And the landlord has to just eat that. Then, to make matters worse, sometimes the government just doesn't pay the landlord. So even though the system's set up well, but there's no real accountability or review of the system. It's just this slogan or that slogan, right? Or we spent the money, we funded this, right? Who cares if the money's spent responsibly or who actually got the money or the benefits? So, as in terms of the homeless issue, right? I'm pretty well versed with that. And there's a lot of ways in the people who actually should get the help don't get the help. And there's a lot of, once again, the system's really built to give the bureaucrats a way to say, "Oh, I achieved this goal." This happens a lot in communism too, by the way. There is money to help fund people like ourselves. And, I know actually the Israelis actually decided to participate in my upcoming anti-communism event, which, I appreciate, I guess. But how much, actually, if you look at the number one recipient of funds from the United States, right? Which country has received more aid, foreign aid, than any other country in the world? It's Israel. Not only that, right, but has the money gone towards making scientific breakthroughs to help humanity? Has it gone towards, right, help? No, it went to the military. It went to guns, bombs, killing people, building resentment all over the place. Hey, look, just like Mamdani, I'm going to say, Israel has the right to exist. You can't kill an idea. You can't kill Palestine either. Both ideas, right? Really, I think, just me personally, I want to see them coexist. I would like for them to stop fighting and just stop being, all kinds of messed up, which they really are. Neither side is pure in this, just so you know, right? Anyways, back to the homeless issue right there. So, Anything else I really want to say about the homeless issue right here? Oh, okay, check this out. The thing is that I'm running Assembly District 36, and you can see that Long Island City has a whole bunch of homeless shelters, the hotels, right, from COVID-19. Interesting that Astoria doesn't have the homeless shelters. That's where actually, Kristen Gonzalez, Tiffany Caban, blah, 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 right? Yeah. They know what they're doing, right? They want to say, oh, we're so virtuous by forcing these other communities to have these shelters, but they themselves, they know what they know that they're going to lose support in their own community, so they farm it out. Oh, supposedly we're back again. We're going to see, yeah? Look, also the Korean American people are actually facing, nuclear threats